Good morning to you, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us today. And here are the latest headlines from across the continent of Africa. The Daily Nation from Kenya: pain in pocket as dollar woes hit households. Weakening of shilling against the greenback is not just affecting big businesses, it is also raiding consumers' wallets, while its scarcity of quality brands is forcing Kenyans to go for cheaper substitutes. The story is on page 6 of the Daily Nation. Why state defied IMF to retain fuel subsidy? Government moved to cushion consumers amid hard times. That story you'll find on page 14. And our MPs award themselves 10 billion Kenya shillings more for the NGCDF and NGAF. That story is on the back page. And how 600 million Kenya shillings telcos debt threatened the 2022 elections. And talking business at a conference and expo. That story is on page 11. There on the business pullout, I believe. The Star newspaper. Main headline: lawmakers sink SRC pay review bid for civil servants. That story is on page 4 and 5. MPs threaten to stop SGR pay unless terms are made public. MPs are again pushing to have the SGR contract and all documents and costs made public, or they will halt repayment. They ask why a document that commits taxpayer money is regarded as a top secret. Good questions there, but that story you'll find on page 8 of the Star newspaper. And then unruly drunken son insults killing that shook the family. And the main pictorial just down there: Azimio protesters confront police in Kisumu. So, all right, that is what we have on the Star newspaper. The Standard newspaper this morning. Protest pressure piles as the clock ticks towards Monday the 20th. Kenyans from all walks of life are pleading with President William Ruto and opposition leader Raila Odinga to dialogue instead of street protest. However, both leaders are talking tough. You'll find that story on page 8. And Lokasa strums guitar to the last world. I think he passed away. He used to work with Tabule or something for the lovers of rumba out there. So that is a story that you will find on page 3, covered by the Standard newspaper. And Kabuga snaps DPP over Nairobi property. That story is on page 12. The same Kabuga, I think, was is under trial right now in France. And so there were speculations that at some point when he was being looked for, there was a warrant of arrest over his head. There's been some conversation that he might have had been to Kenya at a certain point during that period, but we'll leave that for right now. Now, 18.7 million Kenya shillings death in class stampede. And then ban on milk powder lifted. How long did this ban even go for? It was just the other day. That story is on page 22. And then on the sports page, Gor face KCB in top of the table acid. So that is what we have on the leading newspapers from Kenya this morning. Let's take a look at other newspapers still from across the continent of Africa. The Sun, this one is from Namibia. Northern beef on independence plates. That's what we have there. And Namibian Prime Minister red flags high debt. And a first for Namibia on e-visas passports. You'll still find that on the front page of the Namibian. The Citizen from Tanzania. Moody's team in Tanzania to evaluate credit worthiness. And employability under scrutiny at regional meeting, and Samia's economic diplomacy drive and its impact in 2 years. I think that is something that we need to spend some time and just focus on, because President Samia has really been focusing on economic recovery in her country, and it seems to be working so well for her. And so, you know, we need to look at that and see how much has she been able to do and what impact has that had for the local people there in Tanzania and indeed for its economy. The New Times from Rwanda. A closer look at FIFA presidents past and present. Kagame Infantino inaugurates Kigali Pele Stadium, and I have details of that story just shortly. The Daily Monitor from Uganda. Why it's someone's name. Why among 6 to return 500 iron sheets? Okay, let me see if I'm able to read the subtitles there. Heat in the kitchen, the speaker's revelation that she is replacing the sheets distributed to her constituents instead of Karamojong beneficiaries comes several weeks after State House detectives unearthed the anomaly. A multi-agency team constituted on President Museveni's order is assembling evidence to pin adversely named officials. So these iron sheets are meant to go to one part of the country to aid in them building, and her and other allegedly top government officials took them, others used them, others distributed in their own areas. Yeah, that is indeed the nature of how we operate here in the continent. Quite unfortunate. Now, the news day from Tanzania, Army police get 400% pay rise. I wonder what that will translate to. 100% in Zimbabwean, they have what, dollar? Or in the US dollar. I think perhaps they would appreciate that, but I guess it's in the local currency. I don't know how much that translates to. And the daily news also from Zimbabwe. And is it just a political move because Zimbabwe is going to its elections, I think, in just a few months' time? Is it in July? And this could be, is this a move to appease, or can Zimbabwe economy really be able to manage this kind of pay rise? Are they able to really afford this at this point in time? So anyway, the daily news, ZANU-PF pressed for time pre-polls as its bigwigs vie to represent party in upcoming elections. Spare the cane and spoil the child. That's the story in there. The Nation from Nigeria, banks ran out of old new Naira notes to pay customers. Now what is the problem now? I thought both the new and the old Naira are supposed to be in circulation in the market there in Nigeria. But not even the old ones are not available for Nigerians to use, and the new ones, of course, there's been a scarcity of that. So who took the old notes? What happened to them? Because I think, before anything would have done to them, you must have been waiting for that decision by the court, which was made a few days ago. And the decision by the court is that both notes, the old bills and the new currency, should be in circulation at the same time, even as the country works towards phasing out the old notes by the end of the year. In fact, that's a huge extension of time. So why now does Nigerians not able to access the old ones and the new? What is going on? What is this politics of Naira that is ongoing there in Nigeria? And who is behind this unnecessary chaos that is causing a lot of trauma, that is causing a lot of discomfort, among Nigerians? This is quite something here. And CBN fails to honor cash request and branches shut. This is interesting. This is interesting, and I think I was talking to you the other day, and I was telling you that the central bank of any country is supposed to be independent. So when you let politics take too much center stage, you get to mess up the economy of the country. So because when people are not able to buy and sell and access services and goods and services and all that, the economy gets to be affected. So there should be enough money available for people to be able to transact business. And that's how you build the economy. And with this drama and the cash shortage, this is just adding to a very bad precedent. And the result of that is, as the Daily Trust now puts it, energy cash shortages push inflation to 21.91%. That is what will happen, because when you have when you have the principles of supply and demand, they apply in whatever case it is, be it a service or goods or whatever it is that you're offering in the market. So it says when there is a high demand of something and there is less supply of that thing, what will happen is the prices will automatically go high. So when this very important medium of what people use to carry out the buying and selling of goods, and it's not there, then essentially because of its shortage, it creates now a crisis where it allows for the inflation to go up, because what is needed is in very short supply. So that means the impact of what that means to the market, that's what the market now reacts to. By trying to, the inflation tries to control this limited supply of now money for this instance, or a good for that matter. And because it is limited now, only a few who can afford it are able to afford it, because the prices will go up. So it's just one way of controlling the movement of goods and services in the market, because the market regulates itself. But in this case, Nigerian central bank is supposed to be regulating the circulation of money, because this is a very important component of the economics of that countries. I don't know really what's going in there. And with the inflation going to 21.9% already, a country and everybody else, all country, states across the world in Africa and over, we are reeling from COVID-19 and the effects of that. And now even here in Kenya, we are having troubles with our shilling continues to deepen, and it's really weakening. And because of the exchange we have between the dollar, so if your money, your currency is exchanging poorly with the dollar, that means it will affect everything. And because a lot of these things that we import in our countries, the mode of payment is through dollar, and we have the scarcity of that dollars because of other factors, and because our shilling is weak. So that means when we get these things from outside, they will pay more because our currency is weak at the moment. So those are the dangers. If you don't get a proper regulation, and you're not able to curb inflation, at the end of the day, you see that is why the prices of fuel has gone up, because we have to pay more in terms of the dollar now that you're paying to get that fuel into the country. And who shoulders the extra burden and the extra money that is required, the inflation? It is the consumer. And so we have to be careful. And Nigerian central bank is not doing any good. You wonder if they have people who are actually qualified in terms of economics to handle such important dockets. But, that's a conversation maybe for another time. I will digress for right now. So let's just continue with the headlines. The Punch newspaper, still from Nigeria. New Naira pains persist despite fresh CBN orders. Queues, chaos in banking halls as scarcity worsens. Banks expect more notes from CBN before Saturday polls. I mean, the old notes are supposed to be there. They're supposed to be at the bankers, at the central bank. So why is it not available? That's what I'm really struggling to understand. They were readily available. They've just been recovered from the market. So they were just sitting there somewhere. And now the fact that they're scarce and the CBN is reluctant to make sure that this is returned back to the market, it is ridiculous. And the fact that they have to return it back to the market when they had recovered 70% of the old bills, it's a lot of confusion. I don't know. People of Nigeria, I wish you well, even as you wait to go to the polls to vote for your governors, I think on the 18th, because the Independent National Electoral Commission, the electoral body of Nigeria, said that it concluded its reconfiguration of the beavers on Monday. So I guess you're all set to go to your second part of the elections on the 18th, even as you wait for that case in court that I think has been filed. Has it been filed yet, or is yet to be filed, challenging the presidential result that declared Tinubu as the president-elect of the federal state of Nigeria. Okay, so let's look at some other papers from the UK in particular. Daily Express will make this work for Britain. Very well. And then newspaper, still 4% rise in income tax with 6 million facing squeeze. The economy is just bad all over, I guess. The Guardian, giveaway for the 1% that rules the world. And budget 2023. Swiss bank crash stocks, fears of new global crisis. I think we were warned last year about a possible economic meltdown this year. So I guess it started playing out quite early into the year. I think we were warned by the financial markets and how, the response from effects of COVID-19 and all that, the shutdown and all that. The whole financial system, world financial system was really affected. So these are just the effects of that. The Daily Metro, the easy does it budget. All right, so that is what we have in some of these newspapers from Kenya and others from across Africa, and then a few from the UK. So before I get into the weather, it is raining, or it has rained at least today in the capital in Nairobi. But let's first look at some sports news and see what is it that we have on the sports news as has been covered by the local newspapers. Tusker blow, goalkeeper Matasi officially parts ways with KPL champions. That is the local Premier League here in Kenya. So I don't know whatever happened there. And then let's see what else the Star newspaper has in its football. Sport of bother. Leopards Ausems blames defeat against Mathare to injuries still. On some update on the local Premier League. We are keen to secure Super Cup slot, says Strathmore coach Mwathi. That is on, I believe on rugby. Okay. And then European dream on. Man City signed me to win Champions League, says striker Haaland. So, right, billionaire Ratcliffe due at Old Trafford on Friday. Prospective Manchester United owner Sir Jim Ratcliffe is said to be at Old Trafford on Friday to receive a presentation on the potential sale process. United staff have been outlining the workings of the club to various parties over the last week. Representatives of Qatar's Sheikh Jamim bin Hamad, attorney, are due at the club on Thursday. So the Glazer family said in November they were considering selling Manchester United. So that is also there. And Ferrari driver Leclerc faces grid penalty at Saudi Arabian contest. And still on more sports news, let me just a bit I'd prepared here. One of the stories that I'd read during the headlines, and that is that the FIFA president Gianni Infantino on Wednesday unveiled Kigali Pele Stadium in honor of the Brazilian football legend who died in December last year. The multi-sports ground, initially known as Kigali Regional Stadium, holds about 22,000 people. The inauguration of the stadium, which happened on the sideline of the 73rd FIFA Congress in Kigali, was presided over by President Paul Kagame. President Kagame thanked Mr. Infantino for giving the country an opportunity to honor Mr. Pele by naming the stadium in his name. According to the News Times, Mr. Infantino said the move was the best way to keep Mr. Pele's football memories. Pele left us, but he's always with us. Why is he always with us in Kigali? And I'm not being a radical Pan-African. Hey, we have great players here in the continent. I'd like to see a stadium named after them in Europe as well. Why? Do we have a Pele stadium? I know maybe it's just, it doesn't mean much like that. But why in Kigali? Why in Rwanda? Why? If you were to put up a Pele stadium, then maybe look at these soccer giants across Africa. You'll find one. And, Rwanda, and I was talking to you about this on Monday, despite of the bad rep that it is getting from the conflict in Democratic Republic of Congo, the President Paul Kagame is really succeeding in his public relations stance and some of the moves that he's making to just get the attention away from whatever accusations that is being leveled against the country and its involvement there. Of course, some of these accusations President Paul Kagame has since always denied, and now he's shifting attention to other things, and he's just going on about his business like nothing is happening across the border with it and Democratic Republic of Congo. And the fact that the rest of the world, this is FIFA, and it's working with Rwanda like this, and it's not being reprimanded, and it's not using the information from the United Nations, from the US, from France, from these other countries that have accused Rwanda of the atrocities it has committed, and they choose to have just a blind eye and continue with this preparations and this support for Rwanda, on this very sports of this magnitude, I think speaks a lot. Because of the impact or those accusations that have been leveled against Rwanda are not, are quite something and are quite weighty. But the fact that, despite of that, they're still able to support and work with Rwanda, that says a lot. If that was another country, Rwanda would have been banned from any world tournament. We've seen that happen in Russia. We've seen that happen in China when there has been some incidences where maybe a player was mistreated. I was giving you the example of the tennis player in China who apparently had been sexually assaulted or something like that by the boss, by one of the key communist leader in the country. So what followed was the tennis world tournament that was supposed to happen in China was cancelled. Other sports also cancelled. China in their participation, in solidarity with all these things, because it boils down to human rights and lack of respect for women and things like that. But this is so different with Rwanda. We will point a finger at you, but we'll look the other side. We'll still support you, and we will have this important, meeting that was happening, the FIFA meeting that was a convention that was happening in Kigali. And on top of that, to top it all up, we'll have a Pele stadium. To remember one of the biggest football icons of our times, and we'll have a stadium named after him in Kigali. See how the international system works. As long as a country represents a lot of their interest and what they seek to achieve, how they choose to apply some of these sanctions and some of these things, and their response is quite different. It's really quite different, and that's why you see President Paul Kagame speaks with a lot of authority, speaks with a lot of courage, and there's nothing you can do about it. You will continue accusing him. He doesn't care, and he's not concerned, because he knows there's nothing Europe can do about it. The much they can do is just point fingers and come out making these statements. But they can't go further and sanction Rwanda in a way that they would be sanctioning. I've just had my breakfast. Another country, okay? All right. And still on matters football. FIFA's ethics committee lacks independence, and the game's governing body is controlling Africa for strategic reasons. These are claims that were made by former Confederation of African Football, CAF President Ahmad, following the end of his 2-year ban from football. The 63-year-old, who took charge of CAF in 2017 prior to his 2020 suspension for breaching various FIFA ethics codes, says he wants to help local football in his homeland Madagascar after returning to the sport in December. Meanwhile, his former ally Gianni Infantino, which is now the FIFA chairperson, will be handed another 4-year term, since the FIFA's president's control of world football is such that no rival candidate was prepared to contest Thursday's elections, the first on African soil in Rwanda. That's what they were doing in Rwanda, that convention that was happening. So Ahmed believes his ban came after refusing to follow Infantino's desired aims, chief among them the February 2020 decision to cancel the assistance FIFA was then giving CAF at its headquarters in Egypt. So he's quoted as saying, "My suspension was political. After African football's ruling body chose not to extend his unprecedented deal with FIFA, with Secretary General Fatma Samora having served 6 months as the General Delegate for Africa in Cairo in a bid to improve governance. Infantino stormed out and headed straight to the airport. So what this former CAF official is saying that FIFA is controlling Africa's football and the CAF is not able to operate independently. So that is, let me see if I can get us just a few more details of that story, then we can move on to other news making headlines. And a month after Africa rejected FIFA's offer, Ahmad was told an ethics investigation had been opened against him. Let me just take it up there and see, and so that we're able to fully understand this story. So upon leaving the meeting, okay, he stormed out. Upon leaving the meeting, some FIFA people were telling my colleagues that I have signed my death warrant. What is death warrant in football? It is surely to use the ethics committee, the lethal weapon they were using at the time. So he's saying they wanted, there was something that he was meant to sign, but he refused. And because of that, his colleagues told him, you just courted a big trouble, and that will be a death warrant as far as his involvement with anything to do with FIFA is concerned. And a month after Africa rejected FIFA's offer, when Ahmad was at the helm of CAF, Ahmad was told an ethics investigation has been opened against him as the Zurich body finally acted on information received from a whistleblower, then CAF Secretary General Ama Fami 1 year earlier. In November 2020, the ethics committee then served Ahmad with a 5-year ban and a $200,000 fine after ruling he had breached codes relating to duty of loyalty, offering and accepting gifts, abuse of position, and misappropriation of funds. Now, far removed from football administration, Ahmad claims evidence of the political nature of his ban came when sports' highest legal body, the Court of Arbitration for Sports, reduced his sanction by over half in 2021. It proves that the errors I'm accused of were subject to interpretation. In response, FIFA referred to the fact that Ahmad was guilty by both its ethics committee and CAS, and provided the following statement in response to claims that Infantino had personally orchestrated any reference regarding Ahmad to the ethics committee. So I'll just read a bit of it. As per the FIFA Code of Ethics, the members of the Ethics Committee shall manage their investigations and proceedings and render their decisions entirely independently and impartially, and shall avoid any third-party influence. A FIFA statement said Gianni Infantino has presided over an organization that in 7 years has delivered a 7-fold increase in investment to every association in world football. That's not spin, but facts, added the FIFA spokesperson. Now, generally speaking, attempts to discredit him are tiresome and fueled by those that cannot accept FIFA is now efficient, well-governed, and fit for purpose under his leadership. So, okay. So Guinea-Bissau's FA President Manuel Nascimento told the BBC World at one point that the majority of counterparts opposed Samora's presence, saying CAF belonged to Africa and the deal would not be accepted in any confederation in the world. So I'm trying to find out what the deal was all about that this official refused to agree to, and FIFA was not very happy about it. But generally, it was something that that perhaps was not going to serve African football very well. So now he's saying that FIFA is another tool that the Western powers are using to control Africa and Africa, football. So that is quite something. Okay. So, all right. So I'll just leave that there for right now. Okay. So let me not forget and just bring us the weather situation quickly, and then we can move on to other things that I'd like for us to talk about, except that we've already started talking anyway. So in Johannesburg today, it's going to be sunny with highs of 24 degrees Celsius and lows of 12 degrees Celsius. In Nairobi, isolated thunderstorms are expected today. A bit of cloudy situation also, and just a little bit of sunshine with highs of 26 degrees Celsius and lows of 17 degrees Celsius. In Accra, Ghana, partly cloudy, 32 degrees Celsius on the high side and 26 on the lower side. And in Dakar, Senegal, 24 degrees Celsius on the upper side and the low weather conditions there at 19 degrees Celsius, and it's going to be mostly cloudy in Dakar today. Abuja is going to be very sunny with the highs of 38 degrees Celsius and lows of 23 degrees Celsius. And in Kinshasa, scattered thunderstorms. In Nairobi, it is isolated thunderstorms. In Kinshasa, it is scattered thunderstorms. I don't know. Does that mean? All right. I think the Kinshasa one they'll experience more of that. And the temperatures there will be at 31 degrees Celsius on the high side and 23 degrees Celsius on the lower side. In Rwanda, it's going to be a cloudy day there today with 30 degrees Celsius of temperatures and lows of 34 degrees Celsius. And in Khartoum, 35 degrees Celsius on the high side and 21 degrees Celsius on the lower side. And it's going to be mostly very sunny there in Khartoum. So that is your weather conditions this morning. So depending on your weather, enjoy it however best you can. It's been a very wet morning and night here in Nairobi, but I guess we can't complain because we really wanted these rains. It's been dusty, everything has been happening, but I'm just praying that the drainage system around Nairobi is good. Yeah, because usually we move from one extreme to extreme. Now when it starts raining, that's when you realize, we should have checked the drainage system across the city. But I guess we didn't think about that until it started raining. That's when you realize the water is not moving. It's blocked because of garbage and things like that. So I'm hoping that is not going to be our experience this time round. The NMS had really tried to address some of these issues. So I'm just hoping the new leadership in the Nairobi city county government, led by Governor Sakaja, will be on top of things. We should be making progress moving forward. All right. Okay. Very well. So that is the latest, and I believe you're now up to date. So let's just get into some news update. Nigeria will hold its first census in 17 years in May, the information minister announced on Wednesday, citing delayed governorship elections. The census for Africa's most populous country was initially scheduled for the 29th of March. The elections for new governors was pushed by a week to 18th of March. The results of the census determines the sharing of oil revenues and political representation. The country's population is estimated to be more than 200 million. It is expected to be the third most populous country in the world by 2050. That is according to predictions by the United Nations. So Nigeria is geared to have its first census in 17 years. Nigeria has not had a census in 17 years. Because I know a lot of censuses. I've seen in Kenya, I've seen in Tanzania, I've seen in most countries. They normally hold the elections. No, I'm obsessed with elections because there are a lot of elections happening, and maybe because another election is coming up in Nigeria for the governorship positions. But it is the census, and a lot of countries conduct their census every 10 years. And this helps with gathering statistics, and because it's not just counting people, there are other aspects, like it's a whole questionnaire. What energy do you use when you're cooking? Is it firewood? Is it LPG? Is it electricity? What car do you drive if you do? Do you use public transport? Do you use a motorcycle? Do you use a bicycle? How much land do you own? Are you a landlord? Are you a tenant? And how, things like that. Because such information helps with understanding, one, the economic position of a country, and two, it helps in planning purposes. It helps to see if Kenya, we are committed towards addressing the issue of climatic change, and what our commitment is. To play our part, we need to invest in renewable energy like LPG, then we need to know from these census how many people say they use charcoal, for instance, as a means of providing energy for cooking in their families. So how do we solve this problem? How do we put strategies in place to address these issues and see that we reduce the over-dependence in some of these ways that are not sustainable as far as the environment is concerned, so that we fill that gap. So a census is a very, very important exercise in a country. You don't just get the number of people that are residing in your country, because you could easily get that through the death and the birth certificates sorry, that immediately updates the country's population every so often. And so there are other things that you get to, information that you get to find out when you've carried out this census. So the fact that Nigeria has not had a census for 17 good years, this is problematic. This is problematic because how do you plan? What resources do you allocate where? How do you plan around your budgeting? How do you make policies and strategies in line with what you have discovered through your census? For 17 years, Nigeria has not carried out a census. I wonder what will be the reason why they have not carried out a census in 17 years. So the Minister for Information, Lai Mohammed, said that I believe because of the scheduling of the elections, the National Population Commission cannot commence this census as had been scheduled. So they're hoping to have it in May. I don't know what time they normally have it. Ours comes every 10 years in August. And in other countries as well, they choose the appropriate time. This is quite something. I wonder how they've been able to even reach, decide on certain factors and certain aspects of the economy if you don't have the proper figures that, a census could easily give you. Usually it is for the better planning and policy making of a country. And that's why a census is a very, very important event in a country's calendar, so that you're able to access 10 years ago, this aspect of our people or our economy was like this according to the census we had, but right now, how is it merging? What progress has been made in this sector? And how are we doing moving forward? What number of people, how much people do we have in terms of unemployment? Because if you don't have a census, how would you know? How would you know the number of people in the informal sector? Some of these businesses are not even registered, but they do exist. And through census, and when you ask this question, and hopefully your people are sincere with the information they give, you're able to truly know not the perfect picture exactly, because you can never be 100% with these figures that are provided, because some people are just not honest with the information that they are willing to give. But at least you're able to have a feeling, and you're able to use this information to predict and to plan and to implement policies and to craft even policies themselves. So this is no wonder there's so much chaos there in Nigeria. Okay, so 2.5 tons, we've moved on now to Libya, and 2.5 tons of uranium have been missing from a site in Libya. The UN's nuclear watchdog has said the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, sounded the alarm after a visit by its inspectors to the undisclosed site earlier this week. They found that 10 drums containing uranium ore had disappeared. The IAEA said there are fears the uranium could pose a radiological risk as well as a nuclear security concern. Now, what is this? In a statement, the IAEA said it would conduct further activities to clarify the circumstances of the removal of the nuclear material and its current location. It is unclear when the uranium went missing. Inspectors had reportedly wanted to visit the location last year, but the trip had to be postponed because of fighting between different Libyan militias. The IAEA said that the site where the uranium was stored was not a government-controlled territory. How do you have this dangerous, volatile radiology, radiological risky uranium not under the government's control. And now, since Libya's former dictator, as they say, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, was disposed in 2011, the country has been divided into competing political and military factions. It is now split between an interim government in the capital, Tripoli, and other one in the east. Now, these are stories you just want to hear in Wakanda. When they talk about vibranium, I think it's supposed to work as this uranium, this radiological, what do you call it? Whatever it is, okay? I've forgotten the word I needed to use there. So these are things you just want to hear in the movies, but in real time, such a thing being in wrong hands, I think is very dangerous. And the fact that it cannot be accounted for, nobody knows its location. Because Libya is rich not just in oil, but also other mineral resources. And such, like the uranium, it's very dangerous. So that is something that should be under control. And that is where there has been laws that were set by the United Nations under the International Atomic Energy Agency to ensure that there are certain elements that should be highly controlled because of its usage. This is used to make nuclear, and then you can't even locate it. You don't know where it is. It can find its way to even Kenya, hopefully not, but I'm sure those powers that are fighting up there, all those powers, especially from the Western world, they know where this uranium has gone to. One of them must have gotten wind of it. And the fact that the United Nations postponed their visit to the site last year, that is very convenient because of the fighting that was ongoing. So you see, the fight that has been going on in Libya, it is multifaceted, and everyone that is there is just trying to see and protect their interest. And so the fact that they were unable to go there in good time, I am very suspicious. You know, these United Nations missions and even the peacekeeping missions across the continent, sometimes the kind of strategy they take and how they respond and when they choose to do things, sometimes it's a well-calculated move, and they know what they're doing. So it was meant to be going there last year. It didn't because, of course, the volatility that has been ongoing in Libya. And now when they decided that they wanted to go, voila, the uranium was missing. Tons, half a ton, 2.5 tons. That's a lot of uranium that cannot be accounted for. And to make it worse, where it was located, it was not under the government's control. So you can see these forces that have been supporting Khalifa Haftar. They know what they want. They know what they're protecting. They know why they're fighting for him to take over the country. And these are the forces that have been backing the UN-backed government. They also know what they're protecting, and they know what they want. And they fight over things like this outside of the oil and gas that is available in Libya. These other natural resources that they have in plenty. And now we can't locate 2.5 tons of uranium, a substance, used to make nuclear and other very dangerous things that should be under control according to the set regulations by the International Atomic Energy Agency. This is, they should tell us. They know where this, uranium is. They should tell us. I don't want to name countries, but I think they should tell us. Okay, so we had a visit by, I don't know if I want to talk about this or I should talk about it later, but okay, let's just go ahead and talk about it. We have time. The U.S. Secretary of State, yesterday I was telling you, was in Ethiopia, and has highlighted the importance of implementing in full the peace agreement between the federal government and the Tigrayan forces. During a lengthy talk with Ethiopian Prime Minister Anthony Blinken said there had to be accountability for atrocities perpetrated by all sides during the 2-year conflict, and the human rights monitors should be given access to areas ravaged by the fighting, which was brought to an end last November. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said the two men discussed strengthening relations which had cooled during the conflict between the federal forces, their Eritrean allies, and the Tigrayans, I think they call themselves that. Mr. Blinken, who also met Tigrayan officials, announced a further $330 million in aid. That is not how you call for accountability, by providing more funds. That is not how you call for accountability, where over 500,000 people died. And these mass murders were carried out by the government and the Tigrayan forces and other people. You can't be calling for accountability and rewarding at the same time. And I want to believe that these statements by Anthony Blinken, these are just for public relations, because as I was telling you here yesterday, there was an NGO there that had said, Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State for the U.S., visits Ethiopia. One of the key things that he should talk about and bring to the attention is the issue of accountability. So I think because of the position and what they claim to stand for, the United States, so he had to just mention it in passing. He had to just mention it in passing because we know that the purpose for his visit, as his office had said, was to strengthen relationships with Ethiopia. In fact, accountability was not even part of it. And the Prime Minister of Ethiopia has been fighting anything that tries to look like accountability in the 2-year war that just concluded, and the kinds of atrocities that took place in Ethiopia. And the fact that all these things happened, and yet the US, as we know it, did not sever ties with Ethiopia. It is now rewarding the government of Ethiopia. You can't on one hand say, so now we need you to be accountable for the deaths of over 500,000 people, these genocidal activities that were taking place, because that's it. According to reports, a lot of people died, and different reports placed that figure to over 500,000. And the government has not even come out to dispute these figures, by the way. It has not given its position. And during this conflict, the outside media, even the Ethiopian media, of course, which is highly controlled by the state, was not allowed to cover what was going on during this conflict. The NGOs that were active and now was giving us updates on the real situation in that region during that conflict, they were removed from the country and they were banished. There are places they were not allowed to go, and for those who are critical of the government, were removed from that country, and many other things. So there's not telling truly what happened, but we know it was high magnitude human rights abuses that were taking place in that region in Ethiopia. And how many months ago was that? This peace deal was signed in November, okay? And just because it was signed and now there seems to be working on the modalities and the aspects of this agreement that was signed. Now things are just fine, and we're just going to reward the government of Ethiopia with money to rebuild the facilities it destroyed. We are just going to, no, you can't do that, United States. You have to preach and walk that walk. You talk and you walk it. You can't choose and pick how you implement these policies. And that's why I think the rest of African countries should be supporting a country like Zimbabwe, or other countries that have been highly sanctioned because of the same things, or even lesser, because in Zimbabwe, 500,000 people and more did not die. What Zimbabwe did under former President Robert Mugabe was try to say this land was taken from one native people by force. So now what we want is a workable modality, because now the native owners of these lands are squatters in their own countries. So can we able to address this unfairness and see how we can fix it? And we do understand there are these white people who were born, and Zimbabwe is the only place they know as home. But nevertheless, this land initially belonged to the black Zimbabweans, and we do not want to completely take it away, but we need to work on modalities, because we can't have one family owing acres upon acres of land, while the indigenous people who initially did have this land don't have a place to call home. So those are the injustices and the unfairness that Mugabe decided to speak about. And the agreement was made between Zimbabwe and UK. And UK was to play a part in terms of funding this process and being involved. And UK relegated on its promise. Okay, so that is the part people forget. And they paint a picture as if what Mugabe, you go to the Western world as a native African and just try to get this much land and see what happens. It's not possible. So we have to push back. Do I agree by some of the ways and means he chose to implement that? Maybe not. But what choice did he have? What choice did they give him? Okay. So we have to open our eyes as Africans and speak out. Speak out against bad leadership in the continent. I think that is the only way we can move forward. Call out what we need to call out, because we do have the responsibility if you want to develop and grow as a continent. But also we have to speak out against this double-speak hypocrisy that countries like the US, the UK, Europe, and the rest of them advance, and how they choose and pick and how to apply these standards. You cannot reward the murders that happen in Ethiopia in this manner. Oh, now we want accountability, but don't worry about that. We're going to give you this much money because you need to rebuild. What did you destroy? Schools and health centers. Well, don't worry. Here's the money to rebuild. What nonsense is this? How is accountability going to come when this person, under his leadership, these atrocities happened, and nobody is trying to hold him accountable? How? And what should accountability look like for the people of Ethiopia, for the ones who are still traumatized, for the people who lost everything they had? You can't rebuild their homes, you can't rebuild their schools, you can rebuild their hospitals. People lost family members. People stood as they saw their mothers being raped and then murdered, their fathers being beheaded and then, in front of them. What will happen to these people? What strategies do you have in place that will ensure a generation of traumatized people are able to be, maybe have therapy? I don't know if even those services are available there, but they must feel as though some sense of justice has taken place. You cannot find peace and healing without justice. That will not work. And that's why, after the genocide in Rwanda, the strategy that was used and the mechanisms that were put in place to address that issue and to aid in the process of healing is seen to be successful, because they had to have a difficult conversation as a country and say, okay, this happened. Now we're going to set up these traditional courts, and people will come and give their account. There are people who are serving in jail. There is a case that I personally know that this lady, her husband and all her children were murdered. And after those sessions in those courts, that person was taken to jail, but she decided, years after healing, she went and appealed to the government and said, you know what, I forgive that person. Let him out of jail. Regardless of the fact that he murdered my husband and all my children and everything that was near and dear to me, he took that from me, because nothing can replace the premium that is human life. Nothing. And those are things and wounds that, building schools and rebuilding health centers and all these things, they're good. They will aid in the easy life of those people who are there, but they don't truly touch on some of the parts of the people that was destroyed during this conflict. And so Biden calling for accountability, and in fact they had a cup of coffee. I was seeing him having coffee there with Foreign Minister Demeke Mekenen They even had a coffee ceremony, and there was also due to meet Prime Minister, which he did, and the leaders of the Tigrayan forces that battled the federal government. And the Tigrayan forces also, were on the wrong. They also committed these atrocities. They also were responsible for the destruction of properties. They were also responsible for the rapes and murders. So both sides, everybody that was involved in this madness, all these people must be brought to book. And that's how you heal. Otherwise, I keep saying here, we're having a generation who'll be walking around wounded, who saw these atrocities happen, and they feel justice was never done. So they will grow up, with feeling indifferent, and before you know it, you're just postponing another conflict. And later on, this will become a problem in the future. So as we deal with the other aspects of rebuilding the lives and that part of Ethiopia that was affected, let's also look at the other side, and that is the human side of things and what that conflict meant to the people who were part of it, to the people who experienced it, to the people who had to live through it, to the people who were starved, to the children who died due to lack of food because the government had put a blockade and lack of access to any kind of aid that could go to that side. Very reminiscent with what happened during the Biafran War in Nigeria. So these are things that happen, very fresh on the minds of people. So it has to be done in a way that will actually heal the community of the Ethiopian people, and so that they can truly move on as a nation and rebuild in a way that they should. And the US was outspoken in its criticism of alleged atrocities by the Ethiopian forces and their allies during the Tigray War, which killed tens of thousands of people before a peace accord was reached last November. Washington imposed wide-ranging restrictions, just restrictions on their AGOA and things like that, but not that could be really far-reaching. So it did cut access to the African Growth and Opportunity Act, a duty-free trade program that has been a boon for the U.S. textile industry sector. So that is what they did. But see, what Ethiopia might have lost during this restriction, guess what? The U.S. is bringing money to make up for it. So they really didn't lose anything. This gymnastics and how they do their diplomacy to, of course, feed their own foreign policy and their own interest. That's why Africa, we need to be very, very vigilant in how we associate and how we have relations with these countries. If this was another country that the U.S. did not have interest and was not important to its policies, we could be looking at things differently here. So, of course, Ethiopia, which is Africa's second most populous nation and traditionally a U.S. ally in East Africa, accused Washington of meddling in its internal affairs that threatened to reassess the bilateral relationship. So that was Ethiopia during that time. It has denied the most serious allegations of human rights violations during the war. But there is evidence. So Ethiopia is also looking to restructure its debt and secure an international monetary fund loan, which the state finance minister said last year was being delayed in part by the Tigrayan war. So the IMF was saying, you people, can you just hurry up and get done with that war because we need to give you a loan. Zimbabwe was denied loan, and I think still is not allowed to be loaned by these, these institutions run by the Western world because of human rights abuses, allegations, and lack of democracy, and yada, 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 other stories that they use to try to use as tools of control. But for Ethiopia, IMF was feeling, you're taking too long, can you just wind up with this conflict? Hey, we need to loan you. Not that, hey, because of what is happening, we're going to sanction. In fact, this loan we're supposed to give you, you will not now get it. It's unbelievable. Okay, I think I've vented enough. And that's where we end our show this morning. I want to thank you so much. Please, let's meet here at 3 p.m. East African time as we look at other news from across the continent of Africa, and we keep having these conversations, and hopefully for the better tomorrow of our continent. Thank you so much. My name is Miriam Gutu. Enjoy the rest of your day.